Hey Dan,
Hey, Michelle, it's great to see
it's good to see
you.
you
Where are
too.
we at today? I love this location.
Yeah, so we got a lot of inspiration from the podfest that we went to, and you're
Oh
even
yeah, oh
wearing your
yeah.
swag from
You
it.
can see it. Hold on, let me show you my t-shirt. Not that you can like really see it.
I forgot mine today, but yeah, no, I'm glad we had a really good time. We saw a lot of setups, and so I tried to set up our like backspace. It's not really our podcast studio that we used to start in, but I think it's actually really good. It's really comfortable.
It is.
So, and we didn't have to
Well,
really
and
buy anything.
you got lots of new things happening back here. It's a
It's
great
actually
space.
not new, it's just I put them all in one spot because now I actually put it in a
Oh
bigger
yeah.
area. And if you came to, by the time this one episode comes out, our event that
Oh,
we
that's
did on
right.
Sleepy Saturday,
This will come out after that.
then you will be able to see our podcast studio.
I hope you had an amazing time at the event. It was life-changing.
I hope. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope it was
If
life-changing.
you didn't like it or you didn't get to it,
Or if you didn't subscribe,
our next one's
everyone
going
should
to be in the
subscribe.
fall. Yeah. So,
Subscribe to wherever that,
subscribe.
yeah.
We have different content that we can offer people who subscribe. And the more that this is our kind of side thing that we're doing, the more motivated we'll get to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yay. Okay, well, we're back, Michelle.
Yeah. So we have
What are we
been
talking about
not
today?
reviewing things very often these days because I don't know, we're like in this lull of we're buying things that are just new versions of what we had before. Did you
Yeah,
did you buy anything new?
I'm not saying anything that's like earth-shattering these days. Like
Yeah.
that's like new for sleep. But if our listeners have something that you've thought of that you want us to take a look at, let us know.
So, and since we recorded last time,
Hmm.
two products that I actually have reviewed with you before
Hmm.
early on, they've actually been pulled from the market. And not
Oh.
that anything was wrong with them, they just aren't being produced anymore. That Qnol
Hmm.
Sleep is now no longer being produced,
Oh.
and the RemFresh is no longer being produced.
Hmm.
They're different melatonin type of supplements,
Hmm.
which is a bummer. My headbands by far is still my favorite thing, and I'm gonna bring it with me to any future events and any travel that we had.
So that means it will have shown up at the event that we just had,
Right.
but have not had yet on the episode.
No, we did. No, okay, yeah, you're right. So it's a little confusing because we do record a couple events at a time, and that's important that we don't have any breaks. Like back in the day, we used to actually have quite a few breaks.
Yeah, I would say we've improved our. So we learned this at the podcasting convention too. We're trying to get better at this. You actually have to plan this stuff
Go figure.
out.
There's even people that edit.
Oh, correct. That's not us, by the way. We are one take and done.
Although we found
So
out there's actually quite a few people who don't edit.
yeah, I think actually, and I like those people. Like those were my tribe. Like those are our tribes. They were like, we just do it a single take. We're like,
Did you
we
end
feel
up
you.
going to the meet and greet or whatever that
I
was in
did not.
Tampa?
I did not.
Okay,
I got the email about
but
it.
you're gonna go?
I think it already happened.
No, but it's
Well,
a monthly thing.
it is. It is. I need to go. Well, the spot that they were going to meet at closed, so I think it's a new
They posted
location.
a new one,
Yeah.
but
Well, girl, you
it's
know
still
more
in
about it than I
Tampa.
do.
It's
Yeah.
still in Tampa.
Yeah.
So last year I broke up with Facebook and all social media actually, and I'm back on for 2025, but to a limited extent because I did find it very helpful, not
Mhm.
just from the sleep standpoint, but just from that sanity standpoint of
Oh
getting
yeah.
less information. But there's a lot of things that are really important to me that I miss when I'm completely off of it. And it's also very
Like what?
hard to let you guys know that, things that I'm doing. So
Yeah.
something that I've started in, by the first quarter of this year is a little class on breathing.
Ooh.
And I would love for you to join me. It's going to be open to people to join in April. It's on Friday afternoons here. And
Fun.
it's a class on importance of breathing, not just for
Hmm.
sleep, but from a health standpoint.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to share that.
I'm excited because I want you to, we got to talk about this like breathing for sleep apnea piece too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm excited to actually try that part.
Yeah. Now there's
Like,
a lot. And again, I
yeah.
didn't invent this. It's just I'm holding that space to
Hmm.
help promote healthy
Right.
breathing,
Hmm.
which goes along with healthy breathing during exercise
Yep.
and during sleep
Hmm.
and just during your regular life.
Well, and that's the part too where I find that if you can change some of the ways that you're breathing or change some of the ways, maybe like even like, when they talk to you about like positional sleeping, like if you have sleep apnea, they
Right.
put it on that. Like it's one of those things of where like if I can do it and there's no introduction of a third party thing of whatever kind, like
There's no negatives. There's
right.
nothing that you have to buy. I love that it
Hmm.
just comes with you. It's just
Hmm.
you need that invitation to be able to do it.
Right.
So, and we're humans.
Yeah.
We've developed a certain physique and a certain way of doing things, and sometimes, this evolution stuff that's been happening is not always the most ideal
Right.
for our physiology.
Yeah.
So what are we going to talk about today?
So today we're going to dive into our first episode of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And for our listeners there's one episode before this, the one where we say start here for CBTI, because there's some really good foundational things. One of them being making sure you're doing your sleep diary on the CBT-I Coach app, by the way, which is free. You can find it on the App Store. But so just a little kind of like plug to always do your sleep diary. So,
Yeah. Now, for me personally, I like to do my diaries on paper,
mhm,
and
you can
I
do
like
that.
to do everything in my phone. But the sleep logs, I actually really like to do on paper with a
Mhm,
pencil
mhm,
and a paper that actually has a blank back, because I don't like to read my handwriting when it's really small. So I
mhm.
like putting my notes on the back.
There you go. So
So
however you do it's totally fine, but in
yeah.
the app, you can also do it there.
So
So,
I really like the if you do like to record on the app, I really like their sleep log because it's easy to use,
mhm.
and it's also gives it a nice little grid on the background. So, you
The
know,
other really nice thing is if you see a sleep provider like Michelle or myself in the app, you could then directly email the Excel data from the app to you, or like you can send it to whoever you're working with. So
but you
super
can
quick.
send it to yourself so you can see your progress as well.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
that part's really nice.
All right. So you're going to talk about a new part of the app or a new section in the
So
app.
I want to focus on something that I utilize a lot for my patients in the office is the top right box. It says tools. And the first drop down when it says tools, it says choose a category. And we're going to talk about each of them a little bit separately, but the first one is creating new sleep habits. So if you've gravitated towards a podcast like this, or you want to improve your sleep and someone tuned you on to this, it's really important to know that you may have some habits that you've been using that, I don't know, they may work, and they also may be something that you could improve upon. So they may be the same habit, but you improve upon. And one of the first things that comes up when you talk about the new sleep habits is there's 5 things on here, 6 things. The first one is his motivational messages.
Ooh.
And that's a really important
Mhm.
point, is
Mhm.
that a lot of people identify themselves as being bad sleepers,
Right.
not that they've slept poorly for a night or two or even a
Mhm.
decade, but that they themselves are the bad sleeper.
Right. It's really easy to take on that identity
Mhm.
of, oh, I'm always this, when in reality, this we've talked about this with a growth mindset before, when in reality, you're learning to get better at your sleep
Yeah.
one night at a time.
And the message on here is really using the analogy of it being a ladder. You know
Mhm.
that there's different rungs on a ladder and that you can go up and down, and it's not just falling off or
Right.
being all the way up at the top. So
Absolutely. Yep.
that's that motivational messages. The second one says go to bed only when sleepy.
Mm.
And that's really important, that distinction between, are you tired or are you sleepy? And a lot of people look at a clock and expect that they're the same thing
Mm.
because they have to wake up at a specific time.
Right.
But this first thing that you have to understand is what your sleep drive is.
Mhm.
So talk a little bit about sleep drive and how do you get a sleep drive?
Yeah. So really what we're going to talk about, and we'll dive into this with the CBTI kind of session one piece, but your sleep drive is really kind of a combination of both, sleep pressure. So it's kind of like something when if you had great sleep, when you wake up in the morning, ideally your sleep pressure, your sleep drive would be really, really low, meaning it's you've spent all the fuel that kind of made up that sleep drive. And as you go throughout the day and you do things like getting up out of bed, going to work, taking a walk, getting some exercise in, phoning a friend, all these activities. As you do them, all these things are slowly building up your sleep pressure, your sleep drive, so that ideally by the end of the day, you have a lot of sleep pressure. And things that can increase your sleep pressure are activities. So, and exercise in particular is a really good one. But so can being alert and awake and reading a book, but also like talking to people are also really good ones. And things that take away your sleep pressure are taking naps, sleeping in the morning, going to bed at like 7:30, even though you're not really sleepy yet. Uh,
Also, less different environments that you're in. So if you're
right.
in the same spot,
Mm-hmm.
so let's say you're at home and you even just stay in the same room
Mm-hmm.
versus if you're at home and you go to different areas of
Yeah.
your home.
Absolutely. Changing your environment has a big one. So you definitely want to make sure that you are trying your hardest to do activities throughout your day that increase or increase the amount of that sleep pressure or sleep drive.
Yeah, and one of those things is the next thing that comes up on the list is about getting out of bed when you can't sleep.
Mm,
So when you stay in bed during the night and you are actually awake, that becomes almost like a timeout period. Becomes
mhm.
more of a frustration rather than an opportunity to sleep because if you are
Yeah,
awake and you're in bed, you're just decreasing your sleep pressure by staying in bed.
you sure are. You're also associating whether you're consciously aware of this or not. Most of the time, you're not consciously aware of it. You're learning to associate the bed with being awake, and then potentially learning to associate the bed with frustrations about your sleep too. And those are two things that we don't want to happen. And that happens not because you're consciously thinking it, you're not even cognitively thinking it. It's all unconscious.
Right.
So,
The next box says get out of bed at the prescribed time. And this is by far my favorite tip for people that
hmm
have any sleep issues whatsoever is you really want to get up. And you know why I think
yeah.
that's so funny for me is I'm not a morning person. So if you have ever like gone on vacation with me or live at the house, I am the last person that wants to get up in the morning. But I do really hold to that being up at the same time.
Right.
Again, it's not always gonna be the first person.
Yeah. And I would say a key thing to all of this, by the way, is that, we don't need 100% adherence to this stuff, but I would say 90% is a good place to shoot towards. And the reason why I say that is we understand that there's going to be days where maybe you're traveling, maybe you got friends or guests that stayed over, so you do something different. That's totally fine. Just the next day, tomorrow, get right back into the routine.
But let me give you an example because
Mhm.
this happens a lot. Actually, it's the first and last very obvious time that this happened was I had an employee who was really changing their lives. They are starting a new job. They were starting at my office. They were starting like a new workout routine. They also it was the start of a new school year for their child. So what this person wanted to do was get up and do an exercise class before work
Mhm.
knowing that they don't sleep well so far at night. And
Mhm.
what they actually ended up doing is starting a specific exercise class, not that fit in with the time where they needed to be tired and not sleep and try and work on getting sleepy.
Mhm.
They actually cut their wake up time in the morning.
Mhm.
And so what ends up happening is they're actually dooming themselves to fail.
Mhm.
It's not that they weren't consistent with their wake up time, they were before, and now we created a different wake up time without improving those habits that get them to sleep at night.
Mm.
So, they're actually just cutting their
That's
sleep
rough.
time down.
Yeah.
And we know what that ends up doing is creating a lot of negativity when they
Mhm.
can't meet those expectations. But the other thing is if you are decreasing your sleep time to being much shorter,
Mhm.
and in this case it was less than 6 hours, you actually increase your chance of getting sick and getting injured.
Mhm.
And that's actually what ended up happening
Oh, no.
to the point
Yeesh.
that, everything started falling apart and
Mhm.
then they weren't able to keep up with anything. So,
Oh, that's rough.
yeah.
So, lots of good things on the Tools tab and the CBTI Coach app.
Yes.
So, I would say these are all good things to
Reducing
be aware.
caffeine is also listed on here,
Mhm.
and then setting up your sleep environment.
Ooh.
When you click into the setting up your sleep environment, it talks about the noise level, like keeping a low
I
noise level.
I think everyone needs a sound machine. And I mean your phone can make noise too, which is fine, but I actually think everyone needs a dedicated sound machine. Echoes, smart speakers. Almost everybody's got these things
Do you
these
see
days.
Allie behind us?
Yeah, I think she's blurred, so you probably can't. But I mean, here's a plug for smart speakers. Although I will say one of the caveats I've had with Amazon is that sometimes it will stop and then it'll talk to you in the middle of the night. At least mine does.
Really?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
not a fan. So I would say be aware that if you use a smart speaker, that can kind of pop up too. But I would say things that just increase ambient sound, but ambient sounds, actually that's not the right word I'm trying to use. Things that increase like background sound camouflage is really what you're wanting.
You don't want certain noises to stick out.
Right.
So I think the low noise level is very good, but you
Hmm.
really don't want your brain to be alerted to it.
Right.
When we start really getting into the cognitive behavioral therapy, you'll find that there's a subset of people that have really a pretty low threshold for their brain just to be alerted by anything. And once they're alerted, for it to keep going on to the next thing and the next thing. And
Absolutely.
that's called a hyperarousal.
Hmm.
So when you have that type of thing going on, you're probably going to talk a little bit about this when we go into it in
Yep.
detail, but we almost have to learn how to unwind that, and that takes time.
Hmm.
So what you can do is when you set up your environment is you really are honored to say, like, I want to decrease the number of arousals.
Right.
Room being dark, temperature being comfortable, sleep is undisturbed by others, and then only reserving your bed for sleep and sex.
Hmm.
So that's important. What I find is kind of interesting is when you do click in on this app, it gives you some very specific, I don't know, like caveats to it. Maybe you say, "Oh, I can't do this because my partner snores," or "I can't do this because I live in a dorm." So, I just have to knock that one off. So, you really still need to work on modifying your behaviors, not just saying, "I can ignore it."
Hmm. Absolutely. I would say so again, all these are good, helpful kind of tools as you're kind of, working with us, kind of going through some of these kind of concepts from CBTI. So let's dive into some of these ideas, Michelle. So first kind of like idea here that's really important in this first session is really kind of understanding what is it that you're actually doing when it comes to CBTI. And one of the things that you talked about earlier with sleep pressure or sleep drive is in order to get good sleep, we need to have a couple things align. One of them is your sleep pressure, meaning that we want to make sure that when you wake up, it's low, and when you go to bed, it's higher. What else do you want to be good in order to kind of get good sleep for you, Michelle? What can you think of?
Alright, I can think of so many different things. You want to make sure that you set up the circumstances for
Hmm.
sleep that might be most appropriate. So you don't want to do habits that kind of are meant for during the day. So one
Hmm.
of them, for example, is eating. So you really don't want to
Hmm.
put your food or a snack too close to when your bedtime is.
Right.
And you also don't want to be starving as you're going to bed. Your
Hmm.
your body really needs to feel like it's in a good safe spot. So not just the amount enough time has passed,
Hmm.
but you're ready to have that period of, digesting and resting, but
Hmm.
not that you just are still working on breaking things down.
Right. So, just to kind of give our listeners and viewers kind of an idea. So, great job, Michelle. I love that. It's these ideas of you want to have three things. You want to have your strong sleep drive. You want to make sure that your circadian rhythms are correctly kind of mapping onto that sleep pressure, that sleep drive. And then the third thing, which you already mentioned, is that we want to make sure that your arousal level, or you mentioned that cognitive hyperarousal, we want to make sure that that is lower. When we can get all three of those things at the right spots, then you're going to get good sleep. And that's really what we're kind of that's really what we're going to be working on as it relates to sleep, kind of in getting better sleep from an insomnia perspective.
And if you're listening to this right when it comes out, we're right in that middle of when the time change happens.
Hmm.
And so we're already an hour behind. And so to some degree, that has actually helped our sleep pressure, but it also may have triggered that hyper arousal because now you have
Hmm.
less time to do what you were going to do before.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go on a little bit of some background here when it comes to sleep. So we want to know, for the reason why we kind of spend some time talking about some of the background of sleep is that there's some really common misconceptions out there about what your brain is doing at night. I would say one of the biggest
It's not a
misconceptions.
light switch.
Right. It's and it's not a light switch, and it's also not a set amount of time that you want for sleep either. We're actually not interested per se in the idea that did you get 8 hours of sleep or not. We do want to know what's the quality of that sleep. And in order to get to that, we got to know that you're not just sleeping when you're not conscious. Your brain's doing lots of things that are happening there. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about with these sleep stages. So, Michelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about these sleep stages?
Okay, so for the first one, you just need to know that being awake is part of the sleep staging. So it is very normal to have wake right at the beginning. It's also very normal to actually wake up in the middle of in the middle of the night. The important part about wake, which is stage 0, is you want to keep it as short as possible so it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
interrupt or cause like a dysregulation of your sleep.
Mm-hmm.
The next sleep that typically happens, and it doesn't always happen, is a form of transition from awake to asleep, and that's stage 1 sleep. It's terrible. Okay. So you really want to make sure that that transition is just a transition and that you don't live in stage 1 sleep. But you may believe that you're actually awake because you can still
Mm-hmm.
process things from the environment. You can hear things. You may be able to see like colors and lights, but you're really not doing a lot of high level processing at this stage.
Right.
But it does count for your brain in terms of your brain does know that it's not awake and it's in sleep, but this is the worst type of sleep to spend any great deal of time in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very light sleep. If I were going to rewrite the manual,
Mm-hmm.
I would consider this being more awake than more asleep, but it is a very light stage of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It is not always the first stage of sleep that you get into, but stage 1 is like a transition.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with how fast the brain waves are going. So they're slower than when you're awake with your eyes open, but they're probably just as slow as when you're actually awake with your eyes closed.
Mm-hmm. So I
So
think this brings up a really important idea around sleep stages, which is that you're not consciously going to know what your stage of sleep you're in when you're falling asleep, when you're like waking up in the middle of the night. Now, there's some other, and the reason why is because it's brainwave activity that we're really looking at that differentiates what sleep is. Now, sometimes when you hit some of the later stages, you might feel differently if you wake up. But I think an important thing to kind of acknowledge that kind of I think is a little bit of a myth that gets perpetuated out there is that your brain goes through these multiple stages and you're not consciously aware of what stage you're in.
correct.
Yeah.
And so really pay less attention to your wearable device on which
Oh
stage
yeah.
that you're in and more on how you feel in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You can use that as almost like a sounding board so you can like look back at it, but really it's more important on how you feel. I'm going to go through the next couple kind of fast
Mm-hmm.
just for the sake of brevity, but stage 2 is your default sleep. So what's really important in stage 2 is it's not in transition. You're really kind of locked in. This is where a lot of our hormones, like our GABA, which is our main sleep hormone, it's just like you're in sleep. This is default. Doesn't mean it's a lot of great quality, but you're not as aware of the external environment and your body can't hold up its own posture. So it allows for those muscles and the proprioception type of things that go on with your body in terms of temperature, heat, light. You're less aware of it in
Mm-hmm.
stage 2 sleep. And not a great quality. It's still considered a lighter form of sleep. There's this stage 3 sleep. This happens in young people, okay? It does not happen in older people. So you can add it to your list of bad things that happen as you get older. Is after 50 completely normal to have none. The only time that it actually comes back in a person who's 50 or over is after a period where their sleep pressure is so high because they have not been sleeping. But we have a lot of this as a kid. You have a lot of it as a teenager. There's a lot of hormone regulation that happens into it. And your brain waves are the slowest that they're going to be. So they're called delta waves. And stage 3 and stage 4 are now combined into what's called stage 3 now. But if you ever see some research where it talks about stage 4, it's the percentage
Mm-hmm.
of that sleep like graph that is having those delta waves. And if you wake up from this because your brain is so slow and so sleepy, you will feel terrible.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this
Like if you
is
slept longer than 30 minutes.
yes, or
Yeah.
the phone call
Mhm.
in the middle of the night, or the
Mhm.
nap after you've been having jet lag. So this
Yep.
is stage 3 sleep, but it's a very deep form of sleep. And REM sleep is, this holy grail of sleep.
Mhm.
But in REM, not any other time in your life, certain things are off the hook.
Mhm.
Okay? So you don't control your own body temperature, though that happens in
Mm.
REM. You don't control some of your motor function. All the
Right.
muscles in your body are paralyzed
You
except
might be
your
walking.
your
Yeah,
diaphragm, and
sleepwalking, yep.
no sleepwalking in
Oh,
REM.
not REM, right, earlier, but yes.
Paralyzed. Stage
Right.
so sleepwalking, though, importantly, that's in that delta sleep
Right.
where you have no recollection to it. But we can dream in REM sleep, but really we can dream in any stage of sleep. But the dreams we remember, like when we wake up, are typically in REM. It's
Mhm.
more in the second half of the night.
Mm.
What's really important that they're finding out is during REM, that's when our body and our brain, like, it does that detox. So, like, different parts of your memory,
Mhm.
they're being compartmentalized. So, having
There's
a
the what is it? There's the pulsating thing. Oh gosh, I just read about it.
so part having
Yeah.
enough REM sleep is
Mhm.
really important for making sure that you don't have problems with your memory.
Yep. So you go through, so the key takeaway on these, you have multiple stages of sleep. You go through these multiple stages of sleep multiple times in the night.
If we're
And
lucky.
well, right, ideally, right. If you're getting good sleep, ideally, what would characterize good sleep is not 8 hours of sleep, but actually would be multiple cycles.
The right type.
Yep.
Right. So when you're completing your sleep log, which again, I still recommend you not necessarily that you're doing it every day. Dan may have you, do it every day if you're having a problem, but I would say is a very important part of figuring out where you need to go with it. And in my practice where there's like a medical problem or maybe medications that are contributing, it's more important to get quality sleep as opposed to quantity sleep after about 5 or 6 hours.
Mhm.
So, getting between 6 and 8 hours of sleep, if you're still sleepy, we want to work on the type of sleep that you're getting. If you're getting less than, about 4 or 5 hours of sleep as an adult, you are going to need both quantity and quality to improve. But
Mhm.
we're going to first work on some quantity, and that is going to be carving, some time out for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too, and you've mentioned this earlier too, is that you'll even healthy sleepers will wake up multiple times in the night. The key is to get you back to sleep as quickly as possible. And it's not that, there's a countdown, time frame there. It's just if you wake up to use the restroom, great. Go use the restroom, try your hardest, keep the lights low, get back into bed, just try and fall back to sleep. If you're not able to sleep, we'll talk about what to do that in some future, episodes. But I would say the key is to recognize that number one, healthy sleepers, they have they wake up. They wake up in the night multiple times, but they usually are able to get back to sleep and your brain resumes these cycles of sleep. Now, we've talked about this before, Michelle, in some of the episodes. What are some things that can interfere with your brain getting these multiple cycles of sleep?
So anything that causes you to have these arousal periods, especially for extended periods of time, can be problematic. So think about light,
Hmm.
think about noise, think
Hmm.
about temperature fluctuations,
Hmm.
think about medications that you take.
How about apnea events? Can that disrupt your sleep staging?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
So this is a really common a problem that people have that they need to see a doctor for,
Mhm.
where many times some problems that they've had with sleep for a lot of years, really sometimes they can pinpoint it. It's
Right.
noise, it's whatever their coffee intake that they had
Hmm.
earlier in the day. But when you are starting to go through and saying, "Listen, I'm doing everything right and it's not
Hmm.
working," you really want to work with someone that can maybe evaluate
Oh
your sleep
yeah.
and,
Right.
and do some sort of testing.
And what are the biggest risks for those? The group of people that are going to have the risk of sleep apnea more so than others, maybe potentially.
So
Hmm.
men are much higher incidence of obstructive sleep apnea. People with family histories of
Hmm.
sleep apnea, if you are overweight and particularly obese in your upper part of your body,
Hmm.
and postmenopausal women. So those are like the
Yeah.
biggest risk factors. The other things that go along with sleep apnea is if you've caught yourself where you're waking up and not breathing right.
Right. Mhm.
So that
Yeah. So another thing to kind of be aware of that it's not just about, I mean, that's why we're talking about stages of sleep, because apnea episodes can also really interfere with your brain getting those stages of sleep, because really you're having kind of these apnea events where you stop breathing and then your brain has to alert itself to everything and wake you back up again so you can resume breathing again.
Yeah, there's
So,
a lot of different things,
mhm,
but I think it's a really important point is if you think something's really off, really talk to a professional about it
mhm.
because while we're trying to give you some ideas of things that it could be, if it's not clicking, it may not be because of your lack of trying.
Oh, right, yeah, absolutely. There can definitely be a biological, I'm gonna use this word, etiology to some sleep disruptions too. So, absolutely, 100%. In fact, we should have more home sleep study access to these things. Like,
It's getting easier and easier.
yeah.
So Google some of that type of stuff and you'll see it. Again, AI is very helpful in some of this and I think that you need to just figure out what information that you want to take
Mhm,
from the things that you get and also that you're getting some good results from it because most people that potentially have apnea and maybe do some home type of testing results, when you're treated well and you're treated for the right thing, you have
mhm,
improvement. And if you are not feeling better, you want to get some help. Maybe it has to do with the type of treatment. Maybe it's something in addition to that problem,
mhm.
but that's
Yeah.
for another
I
episode.
know. Well, this has been a great episode. So, episode one here of well, I guess session one here of concepts for CBT is just recognizing that number one, you have these multiple cycles of your sleep staging, so N1, 2, 3, and REM, and you go through them multiple times through the night. So it's not just the amount of time that you are asleep. And here's a very key difference. It's not just the amount of time that you're in bed. Time in bed and time spent asleep are not the same thing. So you'll hear us kind of chat more about that later, but that's a big difference.
So
So,
we went a little bit long with this
hmm,
episode, but it's important to set the basics for cognitive behavioral therapy
hmm,
for insomnia because if you don't understand where you're going to be going in the future and what you're looking for, then it makes it not motivational for you to start.
right.
So
Yeah,
here's the
exactly.
basics.
Yep, we're starting here. All right. Well, until the next episode, Sleep Nation, I'm excited.
All
So,
right.
all
Talk to you later.
right.
Bye.
Bye.